also in 2021, we'll be adding these names, among others, to the list. Burley, Herron, Hudson, Hunter, Zito. And then 2022, Ryan Howard, David Ortiz, Alex Rodriguez, Jimmy Rollins, Mark Teixeira. They'll be eligible for the first time on the ballot. So let's spin things forward. We've talked plenty about what's going on with Walker and Jeter this week, Scott Braun, Joel Sherman, Rustin Dodd. But next year, for example, Curt Schilling, he was at about 70%, Joel. He seems like he's going in, so we'll at least get one in there. So what did you take from the results that you saw, and then also looking forward to next year? No slam dunk candidates next year for first ballot, is there?
No. So I think a few things jumped out at me, Scott. Number one, what begins to happen when ballots get less crowded with kind of obvious guys? We start to get votes in other places. People... This is not how I vote, but there are a lot of people who feel obligated to fill as many of the 10 as possible, including 10. And so we start to get more people getting voted for because they believe in a big haul. I think the other thing that can't be ignored is this human emotion of, as a guy gets closer to the 10-year limit, of, I don't want to be the guy who cost this borderline guy the Hall of Fame. And that's why I think you see, like, Edgar Martinez went up at the end. That's why I think you saw how Larry Walker went up. So I think as some of these people move towards the end, what will happen where people's human nature steps in and says, I don't want to be the guy who cost this guy the Hall of Fame. Does that even happen to characters like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens? Because if it doesn't, they're really in our hands, because I think the expectation is no veterans committee, no special committee is going to put those guys in. So they're going to get in with us, or they're not going to get in.
And Larry Walker, I mean, he went 20-plus percentage points in a 2-year span. I mean, he was in the 30s, like 34% a couple years ago. So Bonds and Clemens, they're at 60%. So they're about 15% away, Rustin. But to me, it seems like a different case. I think there are some people that are going to look at it and say, I'm not changing my mind no matter what. This is not a Larry Walker case.
Right, but I think one thing working in their favor is every year that passes helps them because there are new voters. For instance,
but look at the incremental increase. Like from 59 to 60, like you're not on a good pace there.
Correct, but we're getting closer to the end of their time on the ballot. Also, for instance, I will not be an official voter. I think I'll have to check on this, but until 2 years from now, I think there would be their last year on the ballot. I think that I'm generalizing, of course, but I think younger reporters, younger writers, I think are a little bit more lenient about the steroid issue in general. I know I'm generalizing there, but I think that is true. And so I think as a few younger voters get in, it gets a little closer to the edge. I think it'll be interesting if they take a bigger jump next year and then the year after.
So if it's like 67% for them by next year, then for that last year, do people look and start to turn? But will there be enough of a turn? Let's look at down ballot, too, at some other guys that made major progress, because you're right, Joel, you're not a big haul guy, but there are many writers I've talked to over these past few weeks who say, I'm feeling close to 10 on my ballot. So as we're clearing names off, Scott Rowland makes a nice jump. Gary Sheffield, I've been a big Billy Wagner guy. Omar Vizquel is after Curt Schilling, most likely, after Schilling, and then Bonds and Clemens are at the 60 range, but 52.6. So what did you take from some of these gains?
Yeah, again, I think this is the record number of guys who were elected in 2-year, 3-year, 4-year increments began to clean it out. Some of the steroid guys either were elected or fell off the ballot. So I think we have a ballot that's just less crowded. And I think people, again, either because they think it should be a big haul or because they feel like some obligation to vote for people. Because I'm going to throw out something that we haven't had in a long time. I'm wondering if we're heading towards a ballot sent in with no names on it, which, again, gets criticized in general. But that is a legitimate vote. The Hall of Fame voters are told, here is the list of players who are eligible for the Hall of Fame this year. Who do you think on this ballot belongs in the Hall of Fame? If you think nobody does, you sign your name, you put your badge number down, and you send it back. That is a vote for no one. It is a vote. Now, people think, like, what is that, a vote for no one? That is a vote. You think no. Your job is to pick Hall of Famers. If I look at the ballot and I think, like, at some point here, we might clear out some guys I personally think are Hall of Famers. There's still going to be guys I think are Hall of Famers on the ballot next year. But if we kind of clear them out before you get to Adrian Beltre, Ichiro Suzuki, I'm going to be looking at a ballot maybe where I'm like, hey, my vote is, I don't think anyone on this ballot is a Hall of Famer. And I know what that's going to be.
It could be, I mean, there could be super small guys right now, super small hall guys that look at next year and say, okay, there's nobody new on this
right,
list.
if you voted for Larry Walker and Derek Jeter only this year, it's not like somebody's coming on next year who's a slam dunk. So if you've only voted for two guys or you only voted for Jeter, you might be looking at a ballot where, like you say, my job is to say who on this ballot is a Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone is. It is a legitimate vote to vote for no one. A vote for no one is a vote.
Mm-hmm. How do you look at Hall of Fame voting in terms of big, small? I mean, especially as you're about to be a part of this ballot.
I think I'm lean towards a small hall, but I think I'm looking at a few names there that interest me. Scott Rowland and Todd Helton in particular. I think sometimes these guys get momentum. There's something about the way people feel about them. Their numbers are reconsidered. Rowland feels like he's made a huge jump in the last few years. It feels like he could be that kind of Larry Walker guy, that Tim Raines guy who builds and builds and builds. And I'm interested to see that Larry Walker is in if people look at Todd Helton's numbers and they look at what he did in his career and the Coors Field factor has maybe been demystified a little bit, if he's reconsidered a little bit stronger in the next few years.
I would say that Larry Walker helps Todd Helton there. I think he helps Scott Rowland because Scott Rowland's problem is games played.
Oh, yes.
And Larry Walker got in. So I think Larry Walker helps both of those candidates.
Right, and also new voters might look at that because in today's world, we're looking more on a per-game basis, right, than we are at the volume. Very few players play 162. It was a different time back then, but that could also change things. So we'll have plenty of time to go over this throughout the year.